Hello everybody and welcome back to another Draft League Top 10. It's Jed here and today we'll be talking about walls in Draft League or defensive Pokemon. So what is a wall? I mean, the name's pretty self-explanatory. It's basically a Pokemon that is more defensively orientated, that can take hits for your team, um, and then like heal up or like take a hit and provide some utility, stuff like that. It just sits in front of your opponent and stops them from being able to just do what they want defensively, basically. Um, yeah, so maybe not the best, like the objectively best defensive mons in the format, but definitely some of the ones that I have enjoyed playing with in the past. Miltank is the first on the list at number 10 here. It comes with some reliable recovery with Milk Drink, has some useful abilities with Thick Fat and Sap Sipper for a defensive mon that can be really useful if you want to sit in front of those grass type moves. You take Sap Sipper if you've got a team that's relatively weak to grass, or Thick Fat if you've got a team that doesn't really want to take fire or ice hits. So it can be really useful in that regard. A decent HP stat and a relatively decent defense stat, and the special defense isn't terrible either, though it is a bit weaker in that respect. It does not have the best defensive stats, but it's got a decent speed stat, so it's going to be outspeeding a lot of other balls. Not that it's really got the moves to take advantage of that too much, but it means you'll be able to get your healing off before they will, you'll be able to get your stealth rocks up before they will, that kinds of stuff. Can para things, can like with like body slam and stuff like that, can, I think it's got Iron Head and flinch them. If it gets a power off, it's going to outspeed a lot of things with that base speed as well. So some other useful utility, it does get Thunder Wave if you don't want to take the chance on body slam paras and stuff like that. It can be real useful there as well. It does not get any phasing, so it can quite easily become like taunt bait. Things can set up on it. It doesn't get any momentum either, so it can't switch out into other things while keeping up momentum on your team. So that's why it's down here at number 10. Number 9, I'm going with Mega Aggron, which has an amazing defense stat. The HP stat is not overly good or anything like that, but it's got an amazing defense stat, and its special defense is okay as well. It has really nice uninvested attacks, so it's still going to be threatening things, especially with like heavy slam and stuff like that. Still going to be able to output some damage and stop things from setting up in front of it and stuff like that too easily, especially with its ability to have Raw or Dragon Tail, so it can phase things out that try and set up in front of it, aren't necessarily going to be as much of a setup bait as some other walls are. And then the filter ability definitely helps it take some hits better as well, so that's nice on top of the amazing bulk that it can have. It's not so strong on the special defensive side, as you can probably tell. 230 defense is a lot higher than special defense, but that also does mean you don't ever really have to invest defensive stats into it, and you can just invest max special defense most of the time to help that special defense bulk. And then it doesn't have any reliable recovery outside of using rest, so it can be chipped down relatively easily, especially if you're switching it in a lot on things like stealth rocks and stuff like that. So definitely something to watch out for there. Pairing it with something that can get healing into it, Wish Passer is definitely really useful. Next up, we have a pair that are like basically the same mon with a couple of benefits and weaknesses that they that differentiate them a bit, but they're pretty similar in use, so that's why I've paired them together here. They're very cheap, like they're not usually a very high point cost in a points draft, and they're usually pretty low tier in a tiered draft. So for their cheapness, they provide very effective utility and bulk. With the Eviolite, like while their stats aren't overly amazing, with an Eviolite it really helps their defense, and they can become quite bulky. Both of them have reliable recovery. Both of them have momentum with U-turn, and they both have defog. So removing hazards can be quite useful, though the Stealth Rock weakness for Golbat is not very nice, overly. But I'm not sure if Gligar gets that Stealth Rock weakness as well. I can't remember off the top of my head. It's been a while since I've used him. Their speed stats aren't terrible either, especially for the utility that they can provide. And Golbat also gets things like Super Fang and stuff like that, so it can also hit walls decently as well. Gligar can set Stealth Rocks of its own, which is nice to be able to do as well. So yeah, some pretty nice utility there. Offensive stats aren't necessarily the best, but there is some utility there that they have instead of that. Unfortunately, they do have the weakness of not wanting to switch into knockoff users, just from the fact that a knockoff severely hurts their bulk. So that's always something to watch out for with these guys. Gligar does not appreciate ice moves, obviously, with that 4x ice weakness. Still weak to light water as well. So also something to watch out for there. Whereas Golbat has like an electric weakness, a psychic weakness, a rock weakness, ice weakness. Did I say that already? I don't know, but it's got a lot of weaknesses there that it has to watch out for as well. On top of having that weakness to the Stealth Rocks, that's going to be limiting its effectiveness to be a hazard remover, though it can still be quite useful in that respect. Number 7 on the list is Suicune. Now, I was very tentative about adding this to the list because it doesn't offer a whole lot of defensive utility, I guess we can call it. It offers pure bulk in like a nice combination of HP defense and special defense, but it's generally used up as a bulky setup on, I guess, rather than a pure defensive utility mon. But I mean, it can be used that way. It does get, I think, Light Screen or Reflect, one of them. I can't remember which. I don't think it gets both. But yeah, it's generally pretty predictable in what it brings, with like a Rest, Sleep Talk, Calm Mind, and Scold or something like that, or a Toxic Sub kind of thing. But it can, I decided to put this on here just from the pure bulk and the annoyingness that it is to deal with when it is built very bulky. So it definitely is tough to deal with. It has access to Roar, which stops things from being able to set up in front of it as well, which is nice in a defensive mon for sure. Stops it being full on setup bait. Though a taunt does hurt it a lot as well. but it does get that pressure as well, so it's going to stop things that want to just heal up in front of it too much. It's going to win a stall war, that's for sure. Once again, it doesn't get any reliable recovery outside of rest as well, but I mean, Suicune generally run a rest set, so that's definitely something that you have to prep for if you're playing against it. And yeah, so basically it counts as a wall just because of its like excellent mixed defenses. But outside of that, it doesn't really offer a lot of utility in a wall. So, um, but like a calm mindset is always frustrating to play against and tough to deal with. So, it can 6-0 teams that aren't adequately prepared for it quite easily. So it's always something to watch out for. It's always a threat. Next up is the combination of Tangler and Tangrowth. So the Tangler with the Eviolite is almost pretty comparable with the Tangrowth. Tangrowth obviously having the higher HP stat, a little bit higher defense, a little bit higher special defense, and a little bit higher all around except for the speed. But Tangler still has a decent special attack stat for a wall. They both still have access to Regenerator, and the fact that Tangler is generally like tier 5, whereas Tangrowth is tier 3, sometimes tier 2, makes Tangler a very viable alternative. These guys are probably some of the best ground resists in the format. They have some nice reliable recovery options with Leech Seed. They get Synthesis, so some cool stuff there. Great knockoff users. Because of special attack stat that they both have, they can still run like HPs pretty reliably. And because of the fact that they both get Regenerator, you can run things like Assault Vest Tangrowth to boost that special defense, and then the offensive stats aren't terrible, so you can just be fully bulk Assault Vest, and then still put off some threatening damage. Obviously, you don't really want to run an Assault Vest on Tangler because most of the time an Eviolite will be just better overall. But once again, that Tangler is not wanting to switch into a knockoff user, which can be a bit annoying to deal with as well, when like it could be useful to wall that mon otherwise. They do lack a bit on the specially defensive side. They're a bit weaker there, but that can be accounted for when building, so it's not terrible. Still very, very useful mons. Regenerator is a very nice ability on something that wants to soak hits, because it can soak hits and then switch out and get that health back for free, which is a cool ability to have. Number 5 is Alamamola, once again a Regenerator mon. So once again, a very tough wall to deal with. Crazy HP of 165. There's not very many mons that get a higher HP stat than that. The defensive stats are not the best with 80 defense and 45 special defense, but they're workable, especially with such a high HP. Like, it's still a relatively effective overall bulk. The offensive stats are pretty lacking, attack stat being higher than special attack, though it generally runs like a Scold set so that it can fish for those burns. Obviously there's other things you can run on as well, but a lot of the time it's going to be pretty predictable with like Protect, Toxic, Scold, and Wish. Because Wish passing with this thing is amazing, because it gets that Regenerator so it can heal itself as it switches out, and that higher HP stat is going to mean that it's going to pass a lot of healing into your team, which is really nice as well. Yeah, as I said, the defenses aren't the best, but it's not terrible. It does have a lot of it does have a low offensive threat. Nothing is really worried about switching into this damage wise. It's just if they get burnt or toxic or something like that that they got to worry about it. It is generally pretty predictable though. There's very few effective sets that this can run. There are a lot of niche moves that it can use, but it obviously that all determines on matchup. Overall, it can be pretty predictable, but still a really good mon. I like using it. It's a very frustrating mon to deal with. Next up is one of my favorite mons, Gorgeist. Very, very fun to use in draft format because of its 4 different sizes that it can use. For a wall, I'm looking at the super stats here with 85 HP, 122 defense, and 75 special defense. Not terrible overall. Special defense slightly lacking for a wall, but makes it up for it in the physical defense. So you can build it generally pretty specially defensive and still take some physical hits. The attack isn't terrible either, which is nice. Can still do some damage to some threats. Gets a lot of reliable recovery with like Leech Seed and Synthesis, and gets some unreliable recovery with like Pain Split. But yeah, get some good utility. It gets Trick Room. Will-O-Wisp is always nice. Because then that way you can build it like HP, special defense, and give it Will-O-Wisp, and still threaten those physical types from not being able to touch it, which is really nice. Yeah, as I said, I love it. I love using Gorgeist. It's been a staple for me in draft format since I've used it once. I just like it's always been decently effective for me. Always been holding my teams together whenever I've used it. It doesn't like switching into a knockoff because of those that ghost type that it has, but generally you can work around that. Take a Colbur Berry or something like that, and you can switch in once, and then you've got no item. You can still take knockoffs after that, really. It does have a lot of weaknesses. Dark type, as I said, ghost types, fire types, flying types. But it is a good ground switch in. It is a good electric switch in. And yeah, a lot of usefulness to it, to be honest. Frisk is a nice ability, lets you see what items your opponent has, but it's not necessarily the most useful for a wall. Like, imagine if this thing got Regenerator. Yeah, I don't think it would, like, it would be OP. So I guess the limit of what abilities it can use is, I mean, even if it got Harvest, imagine this with Harvest, that would be crazy. Otherwise, like, I think it's like Insomnia if you're not going to run Frisk, and yeah, it doesn't have a lot of use there. What happens if you want to run Rest? You can't do that if you've got Insomnia. But yeah, so as I said, I like this mon. It is always a good addition as a defensive mon on the team, I think. As long as you got something that can switch into those dark type moves, and fire type moves, I guess, maybe flying type moves. But yeah, as I said, it's got a few weaknesses. It can generally work around those, and it can be a great mon to stick in as part of a team. Number 3 will be another mon I really like using, Silvalu. The fact that it can be any type, base 95 across the board. I mean, it's only slightly worse than Mew, right? Parting Shot is a really useful move. Got Defog and Roar as some nice utility moves for a wall to have. It does not have any reliable recovery, which I insist on putting out on this cons list. So that's definitely something to watch out for there. If this thing had some recovery, that would be pretty crazy. And it can be whatever type will be best defensively in a matchup. It can be a grass type if you're worried about something ground. It can be a steel type if you're worried about like something electric, or water or grass or something like that. It can be rock type if you're worried about like a spec swallow or something like that, you know. Water type if you're worried, like it can make a good bulky water. Yeah, so I feel like it's a decent one. I feel like people underappreciate it sometimes, um, but I feel like it has a lot of viability to it. Maybe sometimes it is a bit overrated, but I feel like it is a good pick. It fits in a lot of drafts, and it's a nice, reliable uh, defogger. It's a nice, reliable parting shotter, and it's a nice, reliable wall. To be honest, it does lose out on being able to hold an item like a leftovers or a damage reduction barrier or something else that'll help a defensive mon out. But I mean, that's a sacrifice you got to make for a mon that can be any type. Doesn't even get Z move usage, which I think it should. Like Arceus gets the ability to change type with a Z crystal as well. I think Silvally should get that. I'd like that, but I don't do balancing. I mean, so who knows how that would affect the usefulness of Silvally. Probably make it pretty useful. Like, it would be, why would you run this with anything but a Z crystal? But yeah. Number 2, I'm looking at Mudsdale. A nice ground type. I feel like a lot of the time though, teams look for a more offensive ground type to fit their team. Things like a Garchomp or an Excadrill, or I don't know, maybe even a Dugtrio, something like that. There's nothing wrong with running double ground sometimes. I mean, you could look at a Zygarde too, you could look at all those kinds of things instead of grabbing this as your ground type. Why not grab this too? Stamina is really strong. If you can manage to, like, this can run a rest, sleep, talk set or something like that and get some stamina boost, and nothing physical is going to be able to touch you. Bar crits, of course. It's got a decent HP and defense stat to help with that. Special defense is not as good, but it's still decent, workable for sure. Stealth Rocks and Raw help this have a little bit of utility, though not as much as I'd like. Like, outside of rest, it doesn't have any recovery. It's still got a decently threatening attack as well, so it makes a rest, sleep, talk set still pretty effective, or even an assault vest to help that special defense a little bit. It is slow though, really slow. Like, there's not much that's not gonna outspeed this thing. So it's something to look for as well. But yeah, I feel like this is a decent budget ground type to pick out for a team. Reliable rock setter, and it can be tough to break in the right circumstances with the right build. And definitely been a fun mon for me to pick on multiple occasions. But my number 1 wall in the game, even if it's not necessarily my most favorite one to use, and people always always build for this as hard as they can, because it's so frustrating to deal with if they do not. Decent HP, but like 110 defense and 130 special defense are really nice to go with that HP stat. So it's decent mixed bulk. Gonna be bulky on both sides, no matter which way it's built. It gets Wish, gets Heal Bell, gets Taunt, all useful moves for it. Probably one of the most annoying mons to try and break through. Because, like, there's just not a lot that is gonna just destroy this thing. Even a super effective like like Z Superpower or Z Focus Blast isn't guaranteed to do enough to be able to deal with it. Like, it is quite a taunt bait, setup bait, something like that. Like, a lot of the time it runs 3 or 4 status moves depending on how it's going to be played that match. So taunt it can't do anything, you can set up on it, something like that. Foul play is its best offensive move just because it doesn't use its own offensive stats, it uses your opponent's offensive stats, but that can once again be played around by using by bringing a special attacker in on it and stuff like that. Taunt, protect, toxic, protect, wish, heal bell, or foul play, something like that, is quite often the kind of set that you'll see on an Umbreon, so it's relatively predictable in that way. Like, it does have very niche sets, like a curse set or something like that, but you're not really going to see that much. A lot of the time it will be wish, protect, toxic, and another move, depending on what is going to be most useful in the matchup. Foul play is a lot of the time what it's going to be. So, like, sure, it's predictable, but it's probably the best at what it does in that respect. The only thing that I think would be a better wish pass in this thing is maybe like Blissey / Chansey. But I mean, they're obviously not as mixed bulky, but they pass much stronger wishes. But Umbreon is like crazy annoying to deal with, and that's the reason why I put it at number 1. Even if it's not my most favorite mon to use in Draft League format, it is one of the best defensive mons in the game, in my opinion. And I mean, that's all this list is. It's my opinion, right? I know some people don't agree with me on that, but yeah, it's how I think, it's what I look for when I'm drafting. And yeah, Umbreon is always something I dread seeing on the other team. So just for that reason, I do draft it sometimes. If it fits what I'm drafting, if there's not another dark type that I'm looking at instead. But yeah, definitely very annoying to deal with, and I think it does deserve the top spot on a defensive mons list. So that's why it's here. So yeah, thank you all for watching. That's been my top 10 defensive mons, my top 10 walls in the Draft League format. So yeah, I thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and next time I think we'll be talking about some momentum users. A specific kind of momentum use. But yeah, thank you for watching, and we'll catch you later. Peace.